Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today I wanted to talk about this Gibbz side charging upper and my impressions of it so far. I have about 600 or 700-ish rounds at this point in time, and it's been holding up really well. So this is just going to be a video on the upper itself. If you want kind of a breakdown of my overall build, which I know there's a few issues with currently, pretty minor, but if you are interested in that, I have another video on the build as a whole. But this will just be a video very specifically on the side charging uppers in general, why I selected this one, and how it's held up. So, very first, on that vein, is why did I choose this Gibbz Arms MG4 upper compared to other options? For example, they make a G4. Then there are, of course, a lot of other companies that make side charging uppers as well. For example, Bear Creek Arsenal, I know, makes a side charging upper very similar to how an AK charges. So on the bolt carrier group itself, you just have a charging handle here. They have a cutout in the upper, and it just reciprocates back and forth. And generally, in my opinion, non-reciprocating charging handles are better, because then you can kind of put your hand wherever you want. Like, I could grip it here when I have a mag in, and on this Gibbz, for example, this won't cause an issue. Whereas if you're right-handed, you won't really have this issue if you get a reciprocating charging handle. But if you have a Bear Creek Arsenal, for instance, or any of them that have a reciprocating charging handle, and it's the same sort of thing you kind of have to watch out for if you shoot a lot of AKs, is you got to make sure you don't have your thumb up when you do a mag well grip, because of course that will hurt a lot. But another issue with those types of side chargers, at least that I'm aware of, unless they do some weird voodoo magic with the bolt carrier group, is that you need to use their proprietary bolt carrier group. Now, with this Gibbz Arms, whether you get the MG4 or the G4 or any of their versions, all you have to change out is the cam pin. In my case, I'm using a Sharps XPB, and all I had to do was just change out the cam pin. Took probably 3 minutes tops when I was doing it. Gibbz Arms also has a video up on their YouTube channel on how to replace the cam pin, and you do need to make sure you do that, otherwise it will jam up on the charging handle if you use the standard cam pin on your bolt carrier group, and you'll have a really tough time getting it unstuck. But that's a big plus, I think, of this Gibbz Arms, is all of their designs only require you to change out the cam pin. A lot of the other ones I was mentioning, for example, Bear Creek that I keep bringing up, you have the entire bolt carrier group that has a special charging handle that kind of fits into it. On another side charging one that works fairly similarly to this one, where the charging handle's over here on your left side, I do not recall the name of it, and I don't know every single side charger out there, but I know that a few other ones require you to have special cuts made in your bolt carrier group, or just other modifications like that, where you could in some cases go back to using your bolt carrier group in a normal AR-15. But even though I'm planning on only using a side charger regardless of, whatever caliber or whatever that I do, it is nice to just have that compatibility and not have a bolt carrier group that's just dedicated to your specific rifle that won't even function in anything else. And it also makes it easier to just pick up parts. If something goes wrong on the bolt carrier group, I don't need to go directly back to the one company that makes it for this side charger. I can just pick up any bolt carrier that I want and then just switch out the cam pin. And Gibbz Arms also does offer replacement cam pins on their website. They're a little pricey. You can get them at a slight discount if you order them with the upper itself, which I did in case I ever need to replace it, which I hopefully won't, but we'll see. And as far as the rest of the upper itself, everything seems to be in spec. I didn't have any issues, for example, when I was installing the barrel or the barrel nut, anything like that. However, on the handguard itself, you do have to make sure, because of the shape of this upper and also because the side charging handle is right here, you cannot have a handguard that has anti-rotational tabs of any type, which really does limit your choices quite a bit. It seems like a lot of the higher end type of handguards tend to have those anti-rotational tabs. Not all of them, of course, but this is just one of the cheaper ones I found. This is just a GunTech USA 12-inch handguard, and it does the job well enough. This is a part I'm planning on switching out. I'm currently looking at some other options, but you just do have to make sure that you don't get one with anti-rotation tabs. And now, if you do, It's not impossible to get it to work, but you will have to cut off the anti-rotation tabs. Depending on the shape of the handguard, maybe you could get away with having a few of them still on. I don't know, because the upper is, it's not your standard upper shape. But at the least, if your handguard that you're looking at has a tab up here, you would definitely have to probably cut it off completely. Another thing I probably should have mentioned a bit earlier in this, but I just remembered it now, is the MG4 here that I have, this upper, is different from Gibbz G4 upper in that it is made from 7075 aluminum, whereas I believe, and I'm not 100% sure, so on Gibbz's website, they say that this one is made with 7075 aluminum, and I've heard other people say that Gibbz's other uppers are not made from 7075, and on their website they don't actually tell you what their other uppers are made out of. The only one that actually says its material is this MG4, so I suspect that the G4 and all those other types are made from a lower grade aluminum, and so that is why I chose this G4, which also means that you're going to have the forward assist and a dust cover. I quite like having the dust cover. I would have preferred to not have the forward assist, but it is minor, especially when I'm getting a much stronger upper overall. This is super nitpicky, but having the forward assist and having a side charging handle on the left side, you have one thing on each side of the rifle. It's just super minor, but when I set it down at the range, for instance, you know, you kind of have to watch it and make sure you don't put it too close to the edge of the table, because it won't sit flat, of course. It'll either push up a bit if you lay it on this side, on the forward assist, or it'll push up a bit on this side because of your side charging handle, which does stick out probably about, it's approximately the same size as an AK's in how much it sticks out. Of course, it's longer in this direction. But while I am on the topic of the charging handle, one other thing, and this is universal across all of Gibbz's options, is that you can choose different types of charging handles. I have heard people say that some of their other charging handles have issues, so this is supposed to be non-reciprocating. However, some people have mentioned that it can somewhat reciprocate just from the force of recoil if you get the other options, so I chose the latching option. I don't think it's an issue on their detent option, which, you know, it just hooks into a detent, and I have heard of people complaining about that a lot on their older charging handle, which I don't think they actually offer anymore. But it's just something to keep in mind. That could be a kind of annoying thing to have happen. Of course, it's not going to fully reciprocate. If you put your hand up here, it's not like it's going to hit you or anything. It's just like, I suspect anyway, because I don't have this myself, but I suspect it would probably just kind of move around a bit if you were just on a normal grip. So, but this latching version, it's exactly like your standard AR-15 charging handle. It's just on the side now instead. So it latches, if you can see right here. Probably just cut in a little overlay that you can see it easier. So yeah, it just has a little cutout for the latch, and it is super secure. One more thing that kind of relates, that you probably won't have this issue, it's more of just depending on what kind of lower you get, but for me at least, with this DPMS lower, I had an extremely loose fit. It would rattle around quite a bit. I know it's normal to have a little bit of play between the upper and the lower, but it was, I didn't measure it exactly, but it was just kind of annoying how much it was rattling around, so I just put a single shim into the pivot pin, and that took care of that problem. Now I just want to talk a little bit about why get a side charging upper in the first place, because they are kind of, you know, for ARs they're weird, they're not the norm. The biggest thing for me, because I am more of an AK fan, is that while this is on the left side instead of the right side of the gun, it's still more, it's easier for me to remember muscle memory wise to charge it like this than it is to go way back here to charge it, and I feel like side charging is less awkward. Granted, you don't have to charge an AR that often because the bolt will lock back if you do empty the mag anyway, but whenever you do have to, it is nicer to just have it here rather than back here. Especially if you are clearing, for example, malfunctions. Now, I don't think that's the biggest point, because if you're clearing a malfunction, you need to check what's going on with the rifle anyway. But theoretically, you could just do that and you're back in action without having to kind of move your head away, which you would have to do with a standard rear charging handle. Another big thing is if you have a scope like this, granted, if you're running a red dot, then you can just mount it forward, and probably should mount it a bit more forward anyway. But if you have a scope that you need to have kind of here, a big issue I noticed when I used to have my old just regular DPMS AR-15 was it's very hard to access the charging handle back here when you have a scope on it, compared to over here on the side charging. Now, depending on your type of scope, if you have these quick detach levers, they don't stick out, and I don't know, maybe there are some that stick out a lot, but at least in my case with this ADG mount, you can kind of feel it. Like the quick detach levers will bump your finger a little. It doesn't hurt or anything, but you will notice it a little bit when you pull the charging handle that the levers are there, but you can still pull it super easily. I know you can get just for the regular charging handles, you can also just get one that extends out quite a bit more, and that's the route that I went with back when I had my old upper. One issue that I particularly noticed with that is when I have the gun slung, it's not as much of an issue if you're wearing a plate carrier or a rig or a vest or anything like that, but even when you are, maybe the only exception being plate carriers, but even with a rig, you can kind of feel the charging handle poking you. Now, this is actually still an issue with a side charging handle on the left side, where it will push into you when you have it slung. In my opinion, though, it's just kind of pushing in a less annoying spot than it is with a normal charging handle's position. But that is still something you have to keep in mind is, yeah, on the left side, you will still feel the charging handle against you when you have it slung, especially if you are just wearing a t-shirt or just, regular clothes. While I'm covering this area back here, where the charging handle normally would go, you instead have a kind of a door that just helps to, well, theoretically this would work quite well during suppressed use so that you don't get gas in your face. I don't personally use suppressors, so I don't know how well this would actually work. But how this does kind of function is, if I open this up here, this door is just held in place when it's tensioned against the lower receiver, and that's all it's holding it in. And then you can just fold it up like it is now, and this would be how you would disassemble it, by just pulling on the charging handle, and it'll, and when you're ready to reassemble it, you can just pop it back together. You just have to make sure that you do actually push this down, and then it just goes back together nice and good. And one more thing, talking about the charging handle, this does act pretty nicely when it's closed like this to keep dust out of the gun, compared to some other side charging designs that would let in a lot of dust because they just have a cut in the side of the upper to let the charging handle move. Other than that, this has held up perfectly well so far. As I mentioned, I don't have a huge round count through this yet, but in the hundreds of rounds that I have had through it so far, it has held up perfectly well, and I haven't had any real issues with it. The only thing that I didn't really touch on yet is this is heavier than your standard upper, so if you're looking to have an ultra light rifle, this probably isn't the best way to go. I'll have to check it after the video, but I think the G4s and their other options are a bit lighter. However, even with the slightly extra weight of this upper, personally I don't really think the weight is much of an issue. I mean, my AK that I normally use is several pounds more than this, even with the scope on here. Otherwise, I think that covers everything that I wanted to mention in this video. Let me know if there's anything else you wanted me to touch on in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Hopefully this was informative, and I hope I will see you all in the next one. So take care, and I will see you then.